Watch it, Toph.
And I am not Toph. I am Melon-Lord.
Hello and welcome to Fierce and Flawless, the Female Project. I am Dr. Antonella Kaler and I am on a mission to find out exactly what it takes to build an indestructible foundation and achieve our best reality. I am thrilled to bring you stories of inspiring women who were fierce and relentless when pursuing their passions, who did not blame their struggles on so-called character flaws, and who took control to lead extraordinary lives. If you're a woman who is tired of feeling like your life is merely a product of cause and effect, and you are ready to be the woman that causes the effect, keep listening to learn the necessary insights to navigate life's toughest challenges, break through the most disheartening plateaus, and unleash your inner alpha woman. Hello, Alphas, and welcome to another episode of Fierce and Flawless, the Female Project. Today, I had an amazing time talking to Michaela Jill Murphy, also known as Jessie Flowers. If her name is not familiar to you, I guarantee her voice is. Michaela is a very well-known voice actress who has been in Finding Nemo, Meet the Robinsons, and The Emperor's New School. But the role she is most well-known for is that of Toph Beifong from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm, of course, talking about the animated series and not M. Night's travesty that Toph wasn't even in, that we will pretend was completely separate from the franchise and just never happened. Toph was always my favorite on the animated show. At first glance, she just really seemed like an underdog type of character as a blind 12-year-old girl, but she is just completely epic, unbelievably powerful, and not afraid of being hilarious. Michaela and I talk about the realities of being a voice actor, the importance of having fun, strong female characters on children's television, her amazing new projects, and the release of a live-action Avatar series on Netflix coming up. And we got to read some lines from Avatar, which was a huge fangirl moment for me. So keep listening to get an inside peek of your animated favorites with a true alpha woman, Michaela Jill Murphy. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Now, first of all, do you usually for interviews and things, do you go by Michaela or do you go by Jessie Flowers?
It really is up to you. I mean, I'll probably end up explaining both anyway. So I'm known as like Michaela now. So like all the stuff that I do and my website that I'm working on will be Michaela. So it probably makes more sense to do Michaela. But I mean, we'll end up saying Jessie plenty of times because that was, when I was doing Avatar. So yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I had a question about that. Why do performers get a stage name? Like, just to me, that just sounds mysterious and elusive and really cool. But why do that? That's not like a legal name change, right? It's like a nom de plume.
Kind of. Sometimes documentation requires you to get like official, like also known as. So it does actually show up legally because there's, paperwork being filed and, money being paid and all that sort of thing. So you are actually given like an also known as subtitle when you do get a stage name, just so that when checks come in, you get them.
Sure.
But, people normally do it because their name is taken in like the union database. So you can't have a double of any name. So Emma Stone, she's originally Emily Stone, right? Sarah Jessica Parker had to have her middle name in there because there was already a Sarah Parker. So I have to be Michaela Jill Murphy, my full name, because there's already a Michaela Murphy. So it's just usually a way to like get your one name. I came up with Jessie Flower because at the time, people were mispronouncing my name everywhere. I had a different last name at the time. My name was Michaela Mayhair, and the way it was spelled, I don't know. People would just come up with like Michaela Miager or Michaela Meager. I was like, all right, you know what? I'm kind of over this. So I always Jessica was like a super cool name. And then I was like, Jessie's even cooler. And then my mom's like, you need a last name. And I was 6. So I was like, Flower. And then then that's what happened.
I hear you. My first name is Antonella. I was always the kid that, when you have a supply teacher in your class and there's the pause before your name, I'm like, okay, well, let's see what they got for me today.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. So how did you get started with voice acting and how did you make your way to Avatar?
Yeah. So I guess going all the way back. My mother and I'm actually from Southern Indiana. That's where my family is from. But then my mom hopped in U-Haul when I was about 4 and went to Los Angeles because she had always wanted to move out there. She wanted to pursue acting herself. And so finally she's like, okay, I'm just doing it. And then around 2 years later, I think a friend of mine in school, or just an acquaintance, was in a commercial. And I was like, hey, that seems cool. Can I do that? And my mom's like, okay, it involves a bit more than just like doing it. There's an agent, there are headshots. Like, let's see if you're actually interested in this. And so I actually started with theater. I was in a production of Oliver and a production of Meet Me in St. Louis in Glendale Center Theater in Los Angeles. And then I started in with a commercial agent after that because I was like, yes, I love this. Let's keep doing this. And after about a year or 2 of commercials, like I went through an awkward phase around 8, like teeth started falling out. I cut my hair off. I just kind of looked a little not stereotypically cute. And so that's really how I got started in voiceover.
I'm just remembering my my own homemade haircut that I did with a pair of scissors around that age.
Yes, there were a few of those as well, unfortunately. So that really was kind of the transition mode because my agent was like, there's a voiceover department and I think you should check it out. So we did. And it was a great time, honestly, because when people ask for advice now for getting like into voiceovers, navigating the adult voiceover world is so different for me because at the time, youth voiceover was kind of a niche department. It was newer. And I think younger actors and actresses overall were kind of newer, like Hilary Duff. And she was kind of the pivot, I feel like, of just young people being super popular and like releasing albums. And then it kind of exploded into this whole Disney and Nickelodeon and all these young people started being really famous. And so it was a very small group of people at the time. And if you were on time and you did good work, you kind of were just then in a group of like, oh, we can rely on these kids if we need young sounds. And so I started with a bunch. Finding Nemo was actually my first voiceover gig. I did, like the background noises with like the group of fish and the little sea turtles. And so it was me and 7 or 8 other kids just like running around in a studio being like, hey, watch out. Hey, look out. Move out of my way. Woo! Like just like that for hours. And it was so much fun. And so I really started in with like the ADR. That's what they call it when you do like background voiceover on live action or animation, and you kind of insert that into the movie afterwards. And so that's where I really got started with voiceover. And I started to get, more and more involved and started going for slightly bigger roles here and there. And then Meet the Robinsons happened. And then I was in the first season actually of Avatar. I was Mang. She had these really thick side ponytails, and if you can call them that because they stuck straight out, more like pony horns. Then after that episode, they decided, somewhere along the line to make Toph a girl because originally Toph was supposed to be like this bulking man. And
like in the play.
The play? What do you mean?
In the play in the episode.
Oh, yes. Yes. Right. Precisely. I think they did that on purpose. And so then they really liked working with me. I loved them. It was just like a good vibe in the recording studio. And so they were like, hey, what if we, call Jessie and have her read for this? And so at the time I was actually in Indiana visiting my grandparents. We drove like an hour to find some random studio in Southern Indiana. And my grandmother came in with me because she was like, oh, like who's this other character? And that was the first scene I was reading with, the boulder. And she was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Who do you read this with? And I was like, oh, no one. I just say my lines. And she's like, oh, why don't I read this part? And I was like, okay, this is funny. I mean, whatever. It's just an audition. Sure. Come in, read the boulder and I'll read this Toph person. And so we sent in the audition with her reading the boulder, which was hilarious. And then they, called a couple days later and said, when you're back in LA, we want to call you back for you to read again. We really like your voice, like your energy. And, we think this could be a good fit. And then, the rest is history. And that was around 10 or 11, I believe. And then it, launched into the rest of season 2 and season 3, and now I'm 24, and here we are.
No, that's awesome, and what a good call by the writers to make Toph into this, kind of quiet. Well, not quiet once you get to know her, but a small, blind little girl who is just absolutely epic. And she was my favorite when I was watching the show, and she was so many people's favorite character, and she just keeps you engaged throughout the whole thing. Now, how do you think? Do you think it's important to have characters like Toph on children's TV, like a little girl who's kind of maybe a little underestimated, but she's actually just extraordinary?
Oh, of course. And it's funny because I grew up with a TV, yes, but we didn't really have cable. So I was watching a lot of just like Disney VHSs and Winnie the Pooh VHSs, and occasionally like Arthur on PBS. But I wasn't really privy to any of the cable shows that were happening at the time. And I didn't even know what Avatar was when I was working on it, which was hilarious because later on I found out just how popular it was. And because I had no idea, I had no connection to Nickelodeon or Disney or anything like that on TV. But yeah, I mean, everything that I consumed, I of course always looked for a relatable character. Everyone does that. And I guess just I read a lot. And in most of the books I read, I mean, looking back, there was always this, Hermione-esque, that's kind of the later on, I guess, magical version of slightly underestimated, but the reason for the whole thing working a lot of the time.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's great. And I also think that it's great that she's not I love Katara, and she's necessary, obviously, but she's much more of a maternal figure, and I just so am not at all. I don't think I'm even capable when I try completely to be one, which I mean, whenever Legend of Korra happened, you see more of, as, she has daughters, and there's just this kind of tense relationship as she grows up, and she just doesn't really have that in her genetics the same way. And I don't know. I think that's a good thing. I think that it's good to see different types of women, different types of females, how they function. Just like there are so many variations of men, of variations of people. And yeah, so I'm just glad that she was hard-headed and as sassy as I am in real life.
Yeah, it was absolutely hilarious.
And yeah, so I mean, I think it's wildly important. And obviously there is such a large push for, the female lead and the protagonist and kind of the influencer in a lot of movies and film and things happening these days, which is fantastic.
Amazing. And you must have a favorite line from the show. What is your absolute favorite Toph line?
Well, I mean, the favorite one to say is the I am not Toph, I am Melon-Lord, of course, because that is just like screaming and I'm manic and it's very great fun. But my favorite moment where I just felt like complete, I don't know, just joy in the scenario was when I thought Suki was Sokka and I was kind of fawning and just so thrilled and giving kisses. And then I was like, oh, you can let me drown now. Her weakest moment. That's like the only moment she was really actually like, well,
but so relatable, right?
Oh,
We've all I say most of us did something that it's like, oh God, just kill me.
And it's like, even if you're stubborn and hard-headed and you have, your life figured out, you just still really embarrass yourself when you don't want to. Yep, it happens. It happens anyway.
And speaking of, me being embarrassing, because I do love the Melon-Lord line, yeah. I'm going to ask you to do the Melon-Lord line for me, just to make my day. I think it starts with Sokka saying something along the lines of Toph is just being a kick-ass, as per usual, and throwing flaming boulders and almost, annihilate Sokka. And he's all, watch it, Toph.
And I am not Toph, I am Melon-Lord!
Amazing. That's one of my favorite now adult moments. Is that sad that that's like a favorite moment in my adult life?
No.
That's amazing. And you still sound spot on. Is it a challenge to manipulate your voice to still sound like a young character?
Well, it's funny. I feel like there are two different types of actors. There's like, well, maybe it's only one, but there are, two different types that it looks like. So either you are a person that kind of places yourself in every role and sound that you do, and you can always kind of trace it back to that one person, and it's that one person's essence that keeps, creating these different characters. Or somebody has the ability to completely transform their essence into being something else. And I'm envious of that, because I feel like people like Helen Bonham Carter, who are just in everything, everywhere, and you don't even notice them as different people, but they just keep popping up as these different personas. And then like Meryl Streep, I feel like there's an essence of her, but she's just so varied as a person that she can make it work. And with Toph and with things that I do, I feel like I'm more of that personality where it's my voice, but I was just 13. So whenever I go back to that, I kind of just become 13 again, or 13 or 12. And so it's just a little higher. It's still just as sassy, still just as kind of tough, I guess. Yeah. And
all the things we want to be when we're 13. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So it's definitely just me infused in the character, as opposed to me like putting on something else, which I feel like is a bit harder to do, for sure.
Now, you have tons of experience in all sorts of streams and various arts and stage acting. What do you think is the biggest advantage for voice actors?
The biggest advantage, you mean
of being a voice actor to just actually being on camera?
Oh, I see.
Or is it just a lot more difficult? And there's a standard answer of, you don't have to worry as much, I guess, about makeup and getting ready, but I'm sure there's a lot of challenges to that as well.
I think it's good for anxious humans, which I definitely have had my moments. For some reason, I love being on set and on stage once I have the part. But the audition process, I'm sure as many can relate, to, is just very, very nerve-wracking for me. I don't know why, but it is. And so for voiceover, it's great because you can usually, redo takes either in your home or in the studio. And you just have usually a space to yourself, and it's you in a booth with maybe a few other actors and, the director, the sound operator, whatever. And it's like oh, wait, let's try that again. And it's much more of an intimate experience. And obviously, yes, you don't have to worry about the makeup crew or your outfit or whatever. It's just about what you create with your sound. But in another way, combined with theater, that's also nerve-wracking because your voice is your tool. You can't just show up and look pretty and like do your thing. You have to come warmed up and ready to kind of, stretch your limits to figure out what is needed in the scene. So, there are give and take of, I guess, just different things that are preferable or not preferable depending on the person. But I think the main thing is that it's definitely more of a smaller group in just the world in general, but also in like the actual workspace, which is nice because you get a lot closer to people generally, I think, than in, the bigger sets and on camera and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, speaking of live action, of course, there has been an attempt to make Avatar into a movie that, we shall never speak of again. I'm sorry. I don't know if you enjoyed it. I couldn't make it. I couldn't do it. It was,
yeah, it was,
an interesting take that I did not think work is as polite as I'm going to go.
That is very kind of you. Yes. And actually the first time around I was, annoyed because they didn't ask anyone in, the voiceover cast from the animation.
Yeah, then it's like, thank God I was not really I'm still affiliated with that.
I'm not trying to be cruel. Everyone has their ups and downs in their artistic journey, and that's fine. It didn't, land as well as it was hoped. But yeah, kind of a moment of, I was upset that, I wasn't asked to audition, and then Toph wasn't even in it. But then I was like, oh, never mind. This is a good thing because it wasn't what it really was. Is it wasn't an accurate portrayal of what the show was and what all of the fans like wanted to watch. If it had come out on its own without the show having happened, it might have been popular. But there was already such a great following and like an understanding for like the little intricacies of all these characters that then just like wasn't really shown. So,
and of course, and I understand also that it's of course a challenge to make a movie out of a show that's animated and that's so much longer, and you have the chance to do character development and all of these little sub storylines, like the way you almost when you convert a book into a movie, it's the same challenges, but still, don't dabble in it if you don't understand it. Right. Especially if you're clearly, because there are a lot of movies that even if they are kind of almost like a synopsis of the show, clearly the people who made them were fans. Right. And I feel like that's what was lacking. Like I didn't feel like the people who were doing it actually were fans of the original show, and that came across. But that's just my ramble of disappointment having, time of my life wasted watching it.
That's sadly more popular. I feel like with more and more either remakes or with new content that's being, adapted from a book or something, it's not people who are legitimately fans. It's people who see an opportunity to, expand.
Monetize something that's already popular.
Right,
of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's a bummer because I feel like we're losing a bit of the magic, because normally the magic comes from a love of a story or a character, and that's being lost quite often. But the Netflix pop-up that I heard of, just little whispers of a few months ago, is possibly exciting because I feel like have such a large team, and everything that they've been pumping out that's original has been pretty good. I feel like, there's a balance of good and bad, but I feel like whoever dropped that on the table was like, okay, we have an opportunity to fix this.
Yes. Undo a great wrong.
So I'm hoping, and I emailed my agent like immediately, and I was like, all right, what's the status? Where are they on this? Do they need people? I mean, at this point, they're planning on casting pretty accurately. And so the only, unfortunately, really the only people that I could play is probably somebody from the Fire Nation, since they're somewhat going to be of like a German type of descent and, a lighter skin tone. And so I was thinking maybe I can combine my acrobatics and like be Ty Lee or something. That would be great. I'd be okay with that. I don't know. But yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with it, and I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse to see what the developments are as it goes along.
Amazing. And speaking of acrobatics, you have a huge versatility of talents, lots of different streams. Do you have a big passion project that you're working on right now, or are you just trying to try as many things as possible? Yeah. I graduated last spring of 2017. Oh, I guess I have to say 2 springs ago now. And moved to New York instead of going back to Los Angeles, just because Broadway, I guess. I was used to growing up around the film and, beach and everything. And I was like, let's try snow and darkness and Broadway. So I'm kind of just spread out everywhere. I mean, I dance at this place called Broadway Dance Center. I take voice lessons. I'm working on Trapeze School New York. And then there's Circus Warehouse that I'm going to try to jump into. I audition for student films, for musicals, for random modeling gigs. I bought my first acoustic guitar last year. Anxious, this seems like the exact opposite. You're doing everything.
Yes, it's a lot. And I'm super into fashion as well, which is not related to really anything that I've done before, but I've always been a fan. I've been dressing up and wearing heels since the dawn of time. And so I was really excited for New York for that as well. And I'm starting an internship with this, budding bag company down in Soho in a few weeks. And so it's just like a balance of everything to see where, I really want to lock down my focus and my passions, because I watch so many people just get started and then they get in a few years and then it's 10 years later and they're like, I don't actually like this, or I didn't think I was going to end up here. And there's this beautiful bliss of a bubble that I'm fortunate enough to have, where I'm tutoring for like the ACT and SAT and math. And then that works for rent and I can just be for a little bit, which I think is super important, since especially now with everything being so connected and social media, and there's so many opportunities everywhere just to figure out what you like instead of what everyone else is like telling you should like, kind of deal, which is hard.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Plus, passions change. I'm sure there's lots of people that start up passion projects and then they fall in love with an idea and then they fall out of love with it a couple of years later. And if you're heavily invested and put all your money into it, it can be certainly a very daunting task to try to kind of backpedal and see where you belong with your purpose.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing. Now, as we are wrapping up towards the end of the episode and running out of time here, I'm going to pester you with what I pester all of my guests with, and that is a book that had a positive impact on you or any kind of impact, just one that you would recommend to the audience, something that you think everybody should read.
I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this.
Yeah.
The title.
Fuck yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So this has been around for a little bit, and it's, a very edgy title that's supposed to like scream in your face. But The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, I read last year. And I think the ending gets, a little sidetracked, and the whole thing isn't like, solid of just like put it in my back pocket and this is my guide. But the first, 60% was just so helpful for me in just like realigning myself and just kind of figuring out what to say yes to and how to say no. And it, for some reason, just really spoke to me in how it was written, how it was structured. And I would recommend it to anyone who is either in a transition point or just feeling like they want a refreshed perspective. That's kind of been a wonderful, I guess, shifting point since about last May is when I read it, I believe. Yeah. And since then, it's been just kind of very helpful in seeing things in a new light. Yeah, that's kind of my go-to. And then any how-to books and anything you're interested in, really. I'm reading a book called How to Save the Cat. It's about screenwriting. A book called Audition. It has this little foreword by Bob Fosse. It's, about auditioning in New York like 20 years ago, which it was totally different then, but still wildly helpful. So I'm just in the land of how-tos these days because I think it's interesting. The more you can consume, the more you can pick out what you like.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm also the kind of person that's a little bit all over the place with passions. If you notice some of the other episodes, I just talk to people that I think are fascinating and I cannot find a particular stream. I actually talked to, I don't know if you know the show Firefly. Uh-huh. To the costume designer from there. Then I talked to a female sommelier because I also like wine. And, there's nothing wrong with trying to learn as much as possible about as many things as possible. And hey, maybe even along the way you find something that's a new passion, right?
100%.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Now, do you have any final words for the audience, for your fans, anything that you want to share as we kind of wrap things up?
I guess just, keep pushing towards whatever you're passionate about. You're always right in what you like, I guess, which is kind of a funny thing to say. And if you're interested, of course, I have an Instagram. It's Michaela Mostly. That's the handle right now. Michaela regularly spelled, mostly, like just mostly, normal word. Yeah, I have a Facebook page. I'm just trotting around New York, kind of doing my thing. But yeah, thank you for having me. It's been lovely. It's lovely chat on a Thursday afternoon.
Amazing. I don't know why that sounds so formal. Yeah, I feel like I should be having a cup of tea and saying, why, yes, lovely chat as we yell about Melon-Lord.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And of course, we're going to have all of your social media handles and all of your information available for all of your fans on all of the on a direct link to the episode. And that's going to be available for everybody. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. And I'm doing my best to contain the fangirling because Toph really was my absolute favorite. So I'm glad we got through the episode without me making too much of an idiot out of myself. Just, the healthy amount.
I'm pleased she was made into a female and that it happened the way it did. I am equally as thrilled.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for joining us and have a wonderful rest of a quiet Thursday.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Hey Alphas, it's Dr. Antonella from Fierce and Flawless, the Female Project. I cannot wait to bring you more incredible stories and exceptional insights from women who made an impact. So join me on this journey. Subscribe and comment with nominations for guests you would like featured next. I want to deliver content that ignites a spark in you, so your feedback is extremely important to me. To connect with me and to get the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.thefemaleproject.net or add me on Instagram at dr.antonella. Thank you for listening and stay tuned.